Okay, then I am now recording. I don't know if is there another member that's intending on coming tonight? Does anybody know?
I think Erica was planning on it.
Yeah, so we can wait a few minutes before the meeting officially starts, but we have a quorum, so I have to begin recording now.
Yeah, okay. Stuart, are you in your office at the City Hall?
I am.
Oh, wow. So is City Hall back open or just on a limited basis?
It is not open.
Oh. Then never mind, that's not where you are.
Stuart has the run of the place.
Ah,
I do. Literally and figuratively.
Erica just asked if we could forward her the link to Zoom.
Yeah. I did not get that email for Erica. I think the easiest way to forward the link, because the link to the agenda, it's a circular reference. So if you want, you can forward her the meeting notice, the meeting ID number that's on the agenda on the village website. That'd probably be the easiest way to give her that 9-digit number. Or
I just sent it to her personal email.
11-digit. Yeah.
I think that'll work.
Yeah. That's how I got in. I'm not sure if how did everybody else get in?
I just clicked the link on the email.
Yeah, just click the link. I clicked on that.
Yeah.
There she is.
It could be.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, you're good. Yeah, okay.
How's everybody doing?
Good. Good.
And in there.
Jaime, who's the 10th participant?
That is JB.
Of course.
He's an attendee, so he's watching. So yeah,
Okay.
we will.
Got
We'll go through all of this stuff now. So who leads the meeting, if you don't mind? I'm sorry to ask, but
I'm sorry?
who leads the meeting? Because I remember last meeting it was a little unclear to me who was actually running the meeting.
Chair should be leading it.
Yeah, Tom Boylan in the glasses.
Well, I don't know why I'm coming up as Tom Boland, but I think because Tom sent me the link, emailed me the link. I couldn't seem to find the link in my email. It probably is in my village account, which is saved in another computer right now. I'm managing about 15 computers with my kids.
Okay.
Right now.
Well, Tom Boland in the glasses, I am going to have to ask both the Tom Bolands to state your name prior to speaking every single time, because unfortunately, the automatic transcript will read you both as Tom Boland, which will make it a little challenging for the transcript. So if you could just, before you start talking, just say this is Tom Boland or this is Erica.
How about if it's Tom, he just speaks, and if it's me, I say my name. Would that work?
Probably
Either way.
still be confusing on the transcript, but
Okay,
um,
fine, whatever you say.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. Okay,
Could I
So-
suggest, since we have someone as an attendee, that perhaps we deal with the 5 Brandreth and 14 Church first, and then you can go to open space and wetlands?
is Tom actually on the call?
Tom Boland
Yes.
is on the call.
Okay, good, okay. I'm sorry, I don't have this in seeing everybody mode, so I wasn't sure if I was preempting you from being on the call, Tom. Okay, So-
Are we missing anyone? Because we do have somebody who's a phone call-in listener, and I don't know who it is.
Jessica Hewlett is not on.
So she's here.
Is she?
Mhm.
Jessica, I apologize.
I'm
Shows
here.
what happens when I don't look at my full screen. My mistake.
Okay.
So we go one.
so the only person that we're missing today is Luis.
Right.
And I
Um,
think, yeah,
We may have him as a call-in, so if you give me a second, I'm gonna let them talk. Hello, 914-923-3001.
Hello. My name is
Uh,
Cynthia, so I'm not the person you're looking for. And the reason I'm on the call is to listen to your review of the wetlands draft.
Great.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
And
All
I
right,
tried to zoom in and couldn't. It wouldn't let me zoom in, so
Did you try to get in through the agenda?
I did.
Okay,
wouldn't
so
let me.
the agenda that's posted online does have what's known as a circular reference. So
Mhm.
essentially, if you click on it, it just takes you back to the agenda itself. But
Right.
if you go down, you'll see there's a meeting ID. So if you go onto Zoom and put that meeting ID in, it will
In.
take you in as an attendee. And
Very
then it'll
good.
work under Zoom.
Very good. So I will listen for now and maybe call back in when you get to wetlands.
Thanks.
okay. So, thank you everybody for coming tonight. And this is Erica Boach, by the way. And it looks like we have a couple things on the agenda. Do we have someone from the 14 Church Street to come speak with us tonight? Is that how that's working, or we're just going over this document?
I don't think Erica, I don't believe you're going to have someone there tonight, but we'll go, if we could just go over their document and review that. 14 Church was a prior planning board application, and now it's before the zoning board for a different application. Previously, the planning board approved them to do residential upstairs, which was otherwise in a commercial building. They now wish to get a use variance and do residential downstairs. And this is on Church. So because it is west of Route 9, and because it would be an unlisted action, it would come within the LWRP and therefore require a recommendation from this council to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which would then make the determination of consistency.
Okay, so we've already seen, I'm just looking at the map here of 14 Church on the,
I just have a statement to make about this one. I think we should let them know that they are in the LWRP because they listed themselves as not being in it. When I reviewed the document, I forget which question it was. They said that they are not within the district or within the boundary.
I
okay,
may spoke to the applicant's attorney today and corrected that misapprehension.
Okay. Okay.
That's why you now have the coastal assessment form.
Yes. Okay.
got it.
Yeah.
So permit residential use throughout the entire building. So it used to be like doctor's offices and things, right?
That is accurate, Erica.
And so now they're turning it into residential and they want a parking variance. What does that mean? What kind of variance? Do we know, do we have a sense of what kind of variance they're asking for?
Jaime, you have the zoning application, because that would indicate.
Yes,
that-
I do.
Okay,
Yeah. So, so we have all the various different details about this project. Without getting too much into it, the use variances, the area variances, all these things kind of get brought up whenever you open up the variances for any of the small things, and whenever you're trying to push forward an application. In this instance, my understanding is that this is not looking to do anything in terms of expanding the size. They're not going to be building any new parking spaces. They're not going to be really constructing anything external of the building. The work that's taking place is inside the building itself. So from the standpoint of the impact that it's going to have on just kind of the environment in general, it's not new construction, it's rehab. So there's no new development that's disturbing any, currently undisturbed soil. There's no increase in impervious surface that deals with stormwater runoff. And so because this is an unlisted action, which essentially means there's just no category really to put it in, because you don't know what it is, and that's what you get with a use variance. You have to review it, right? It falls under the criteria for the LWRP because it is in the LWRP and it is an unlisted action. But it's not similar, I think, to other developments that you have where there's new buildings going up and there's an actual impact outside. So it is technically something that you review, but it doesn't have a particularly tremendous impact on really anything that you would see outside of the building.
Well, I guess the only thing I could think of that would change that, would be something that would be of interest to us is the trash containment. If it turns into from an office to residential, there's going to be a different situation with the trash, right? So, we might want to, I don't know, I haven't seen a variance before, so I'm not really sure how we're supposed to comment on it and whether that would be a comment that they would be interested in hearing from us. And, maybe something that they think of themselves, but what is the protocol with receiving these variances? Do we compose a letter back to the zoning board, Stuart? Is that how that works?
yes, it would be similar to what you did, if you recall, for the atria, where that was for the planning board.
Okay.
What you would effectively do, and they're asking both for an area variance, they're asking for a use variance, and they're asking for an interpretation under the zoning code. You can simply indicate to them that there are some questions you have with regard to, proper storage and maintenance of trash facilities. And when this is before the zoning board, I believe the next zoning board meeting is actually a week from tonight.
Okay.
And you can certainly raise that for them. And that'll be one of the issues that can be, brought to their attention with regard to any of the concerns that you folks have. The real issue before you is obviously the consistency with the LWRP and the goals that are set forth in the LWRP. Any concerns that you have, you can certainly put in, letter format, and that'll be circulated to the 5 members of the ZBA in advance of any determination that they make.
When is the date of that meeting, Stuart?
I believe it's a week from tonight, Erica.
6/9, the 9th.
Yep.
Okay.
Erica, this is.
If I can, I'd like to share with you also something that Stuart sent out earlier today. It's the LWRP program policies. And so I think this is for your use when you're reviewing these things. It's a checklist that you can use to kind of address some of the questions that you're supposed to review.
Mhm.
It is 7 pages. And I think that's a good guideline for how you can review this project and any other project that comes forward. And I think that if you interpret it as sort of being more expansive, there are comments that are not listed here that you would like to provide, but aren't explicitly listed here, then you can add those as well in a letter in addition to this. But essentially, your letter probably should reference as much as possible these types of questions, as well as any additional questions that you think should be addressed that are sort of missing from this form.
Okay.
Would that be accurate, Stuart?
That's correct. And the goals that are referenced under the far left column of checklist, where it says checklist, those goals are actually stated in fairly significant detail in the LWRP itself. So if you go to that document, which I believe is accessible through the EAC website, but certainly through the village's website, you can see what those are. Many of these checklists here are probably inapplicable to the particular project we're talking about because we're not directly on the waterfront, which is where a number of these questions come in. But to the effect that you think that there is an issue, you can certainly, again, present it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which can put certain conditions on variances if they believe it appropriate and related to the particular application before.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Erica.
think as a guide, you know, when you have new projects coming in that are going to have some sort of disturbance on the land, those are the projects that are going to be, I would assume, to be really the most interest to you.
Can you repeat that last thing again?
I think that the projects that would be of most interest to you are the ones that are not just simple rehabs, but are developments that are either, you know, adding on to existing buildings or are, you know, redevelopments or developments of vacant land, because those are the types of developments that are really going to have the most significant impact and have really kind of the most ability to change, you know, depending on the recommendations that you make.
I'm sorry, this is Erica speaking. I think I heard Tom speak up before.
Yeah, this is Tom Boland. What I think this is I think Stuart and Jaime were saying what I was trying to get in there to also say, in that the project here at 14 Church is an interior renovation, and we can go through the 7-page checklist, but I think this one's pretty straightforward, that it's consistent with the LWRP.
Yeah.
We'll be able to issue that letter saying that it's consistent, and I don't think there's really anything else for us to review with this one.
This is Erica. I agree that we certainly need to address the items in the checklist, but we've sort of had this conversation before about, you know, what the purpose is of this group, and I think it's fair for us to mention other things that we think are environmentally significant for the village. Why not? But certainly, you know, what's in this list is you know, priority. And Jaime's right. We're not really seeing a lot of, and Stuart mentioned this also, we're not really seeing too many waterfront projects. So a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily, you know, relevant. But, you know, certainly I think it's worth our while to bring things up that we think are important to, you know, the environmental quality in the village of Ossining, if it's beyond this list. Right? I don't know.
I agree with that.
I
think the list is pretty, I think the list captures a lot if you look at it. And I agree with you. If there was something with this project that was worth calling out that wasn't on the list, then yes. But
yeah, I think that there are, you know, not specific to this project, but in similar vein to what the county does when projects are referred to them. They have some standard comments that they append to pretty much every project that they review that talks about, you know, inflow and infiltration and you know, supporting bike racks and supporting things like that. And those are sort of their standard comments that they attach to every letter that don't necessarily have teeth, but try to guide, you know, projects moving forward to provide things that are beneficial to the priorities of the county planning board. And so I think that even in rehab projects, while you may not have much ability to modify, you know, this project, because there's just really not a lot to talk about there, you do have the opportunity, I think, to, you know, make statements about, you know, positive environmental advice that you would provide to any developer, like providing, you know, space for bike racks inside a building, or, you know, doing a better job of packaging your trash in rehabs or things like that. And so those are comments that really, they're not benign. They are actual, useful comments that will get passed on to the planning board and the zoning board when they take a look at them, that may be able to be used down the road, but will hopefully, as they're being heard over and over and over again, become things that are taken into consideration for every project. And I think that that's kind of the goal that you have in this instance, is figure out what is the best practices that you'd like to guide in these types of projects. And you can append those. Again, you can answer all the LWRP questions, but you can also append those additional statements which are useful towards the, the better development of the village.
Yes. I like the bike rack, Jaime. Good one. Just doing a drive-by, because again, if we're not seeing plans, we can just sort of look and see what's going on in that building. And to me, it looks like the landscaping is in pretty poor shape. The trees are dying. We may want to suggest that they, have another look if they own that little nature strip. The village owns the trees, but then there's a little nature strip and the trees look pretty bad. That might be something that we want to mention. And yeah, I don't know if anybody else has anything else that, if you know the building there, it's right behind Lucy's Pizza. They have pretty good amount of parking, I would say. So it doesn't look like that's going to be.
I don't think they have any parking.
Oh, that whole lot behind the brick
That's
building?
not their lot. I think that was one of the questions, right? One of the comments. If I may have misunderstood, but it's street parking, but they don't.
You're a little muffled.
I'll mute. They said they had a bunch of parking permits, that wouldn't be an
Parking
issue
permits
in their applicant.
Having parking spaces. Parking permits, that means that they're parking on the street with parking permits. Because they don't have parking.
Well, they have an area variance application. I think they're asking for a variance from the parking requirement. So I'm gonna go to the area variance app and then we'll see what they are asking for.
Okay, well, I mean, that's not really in our purview, parking per se, but hopefully that gets addressed as a citizen.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking for a waiver from the planning board for the parking requirements. I think at this time, so they're saying they may need a variance. They're asking for an interpretation, I guess, to determine whether or not they need a variance on the parking or whether they can get a waiver from the planning board.
That was a very long conversation at the meeting, that whole parking scenario.
Okay. Well, we don't really need to get into that unless anybody has anything they wanted to bring up.
So I think you mentioned the garbage disposal. I've never been behind that building, but the way that building sits, because it was built as commercial, the garbage may be some recommendations. I'll make that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you have that application. I know they have, they're going to the zoning board next week. So I think their hope was to get a letter from this board prior to the zoning board next week.
Okay.
Would you like to go through the checklist now? Would you like to put together a letter now, or would you like to, work on it outside of the meeting and circulate it via email?
This is Erica, and this is something that I wanted to bring up with the group, is maybe someone could, I've taken some notes on 14 Church, and I will compose a response based on our conversation here tonight. I don't think we necessarily need to go through the checklist right now because it is quite lengthy and it doesn't necessarily apply. I always circulate I'll circulate the letter to the group before it gets sent. But I think to save everyone's time, we can skip the checklist for now. Does someone else on the call in the EAC want to volunteer to take notes on the Brandreth and compose the EAC, whatever we discussed tonight for that part, and then send it to me to add to the final letter?
I can do that.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Okay, so can we just quickly, this is Erica again. So the person who was on the call before, was that like a concerned citizen or?
Yes.
Okay.
They were interested in the wetlands application,
Okay,
or the wetlands ordinance. I'm sorry.
okay. So let's, should we talk about 5 Brandreth?
Yeah. So 5 Brandreth is it's kind of similar, I believe. There is some differences, but it's primarily actually it's very similar. It's a use variance. The bottom floor is mostly commercial space. They are looking to convert the bottom floor into residential space, leaving some of it as commercial and turning some of it into residential. So that's really the kind of the biggest shift. They're cutting the amount of retail by about half. They're requesting a use variance and an area variance to get that. So that process obviously requires, a review by the zoning board with various levels of detail to get that. But I think what you're being asked are similar questions here. They're making changes to the interior of the building. They are proposing no additional parking spaces, and they are not proposing any development outside of the building envelope. So there's no additional disturbance to the ground around it.
I was a little confused by what they were talking about with how they would use the workspace. I know there was some back and forth, and there was stuff from meetings going back to 2011 that were included in the packet. So are they converting it to that workspace to a, I guess they were using it for refurbishing furniture and like the use of chemicals? Is that still happening, or is that just going to be a workspace for Mrs. Silva to work out of? Like I was a little confused by that.
I believe the space is remaining to be used under the same function. So currently it's being used by Mrs. Silva. It will continue to be used by Mrs. Silva in the same manner that it is now. And basically half of the retail space is being removed and turned into an apartment.
If we have JB on the call, do we want to maybe post?
Yeah, that's a
some of
good
the
idea.
questions?
That's a great idea.
JB, you there? I thought he was.
He is there. JB.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi, Jorge.
How are you, Stuart?
I'm well, JB. We got a question from one of our members. Kate, do you want to ask that again, please?
I was a little confused about what the workspace was being used for. In the application, it mentioned the use of chemicals. Is that still part of the plan? Is the workspace being used for Mrs. Silva to refurbish furniture with the use of chemicals?
No, I think you're in the original. I think I wasn't around for that one, but 2013 when the rest of the first floor was converted into 3 apartments. There was talk at the time that she was going to use the area as a for the furniture, but she's still on Main Street. They never moved from there, so it was always trying to be rented as an office. And now what we're doing is reducing when we had 1,000 square feet or 1,078 square feet of office, we're bringing it down to like 300 square feet, and we're converting the rest into an apartment. So that's the only change. It's all internal. There is no site plan change. and there is no, is basically 1,000 square feet office space is becoming 300 square feet office space. There's no, that I recall, there was never any chemicals used at the property.
I think it was just, there was some confusion because I know they mentioned the furniture store from Main Street and the move from the back of that store to the front of that
Right. And I think,
building. And I think that's where the confusion came in because there was a lot of back and forth in the documents referring to those properties and how they were
right,
being used.
I think, right, and the original, when they obtained the original variance, they did, that was the intent that they had, but it never, that switch never was made, or if it was made, it was abandoned early on.
Okay.
Now I have to lock the door. Yeah.
I don't really, this is Erica, I don't really have any comments about this one. Seems like a pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm. And that was the only question I had.
Yeah.
You know, again, I would say, as I mentioned before, this is a really good opportunity when writing a response letter to provide some of those boilerplate comments. And, you know, just as a side note, when you have a high density building in an area and you're short on parking, providing, you know, space inside the building to store bicycles, you know, may provide a different means of mobility for people, which, you know, would be potentially a way to reduce the impact or the need for parking in the neighborhood and put less cars on the road.
How
Also
many-
I think
making
it's a
sure
worthwhile
that there's
comment.
appropriate garbage area. There's a lot of issues in the downtown about tenants and their responsibility, and they're taking garbage, putting it to public space rather than supplied by landlord. Garbage disposal and how that works. And I think similarly to the previous one, there has to be a greater statement about that.
Yeah. So this is Melita's property.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And right now, how many tenants are there? There's a lot of mailboxes.
There's 10 tenants, there will be 11.
Okay. And currently they're parking across the street in the lot across the street?
I'm not sure how many of them have parking tags or where they park right now. But
Yeah. Okay.
I'm assuming that they have parked across the street, yeah.
And the plan said additional two parking would be the assumption under this change, additional 2 cars.
Right, but there's also, I think we included that in the numbers,
Yeah.
we are reducing the demand from office space. So there will be a higher demand for the apartment side, but it will be a reduction in the office space.
When I look at this building, I really think, I love Jaime's idea of talking about bike racks. It looks really hard to fit any bike racks. They really maximize the structure on this lot. But boy, wouldn't it be great if there was a bike rack in the parking lot across the street? Just saying, if anybody on the village board wanted to plant that seed for them. That would be really great to get even some, you know, local funding for that. That would be a great thing, bike rack in that lot.
We ask the developers to contribute money to bike racks since they
That would
don't
be
have-
great. I mean,
since
can't
they
be
don't
that
have room in their buildings for it.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something new to think about.
That would be a pretty convenient, I mean, you know, everybody knows that Ossining is a giant hill, but that spot actually wouldn't be such a bad location for someone to bike to the train and back. It would be a good idea. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't have anything else I wanted to add, so we just talk about trash and bikes. There's really not a lot of landscaping, so And then Jessica, would you please go through the checklist and see if there's anything that looks relevant, and then bring it up in your notes to the letter, and then once you send it to me, I will compile everything in one letter and then circulate it before it goes forward to the board.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, JB.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jorge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it looks like we also, I'm not sure if the concerned citizen, Cynthia, I think her name was, is on the call.
No, they're no longer on the call.
Okay. I don't know if we have anything to talk about with the open space study. It seems like we're kind of still emerging from.
So for
madness.
the open space inventory, I compiled a lot of other open space inventory ideas from surrounding municipalities. I looked at some of the comprehensive plans for some of the villages. I looked at Tarrytown. I looked at Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow doesn't really have anything in their plans that specifically addresses open space, but I did pull stuff from Briarcliff, Croton, and a bunch of other places. So I think the issue right now is just getting a definitive definition of what we want to use. Do we want to include public, private, and the issue of the size of our lots. I know last time we talked about just getting some of the land use information so we can make some simple Excel sheets and just try to just get all of that in order, and that could be done relatively quickly. It was just more of doing the footwork just to make sure that the lots that I've at least flagged and how we define them actually are what our files say they are. You know, there could be some discrepancy between whether it actually still is an open space area, are these actually vacant lots. So that's really where I am at the moment. Right now, what I've put together is about 10 pages. I'm going to consolidate that so that it's a little more concise. The link is available for everyone to look at if there's a particular thing in a definition that they like, that they would want to see included in how we define our open space, because according to our comp plan, it says we should have an inventory, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is actually make the inventory. And what we do have in the comp plan is a very general, definitely listing the parks and the big open spaces area, but there are a lot of smaller things that we can consider adding to that list. I mean, if there's nothing in particular that stands out to you in any of the definitions, like I have stuff from Scarsdale and New Rochelle and North Castle, and so I have Cortland, Eastchester, Lewisboro, I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, and how they've defined open space in their planning. So I guess it's more of like, I just want to know if there's a particular definition that other members would like to use, or.
Can you, sorry, this is Erica. Can you talk about how some of the towns, we're really not very similar to Lewisboro, for example.
Right. I
used to live there, and it's much different than Ossining. But I would be curious to know how other river towns and sound towns define open space, because those are much more similar to here.
The issue that's come up with those is that a lot of the towns that surround Ossining are bigger, and they have a lot more green space, that they've included in their plans. Like I know some of these areas are definitely out of our area, but for example, where is it? Eastchester's too far, like Cortland. Oh, Briarcliff, here we go. Any land area zoned for open space So land that is not intensively developed for residential, commercial, industrial, or institutional use can be public or private. That's their definition. So there are a lot of definitions that are very much like that, where it's a very general, kind of broad, where it just says as long as it's not intensely developed, they consider it open space. In some cases, they are referring to lands that have been put aside through land trusts that have had conservation easements, parks, playgrounds. Which one was it? There were a few in here that actually identified private property. As long as there was a certain percentage on private property that wasn't utilized, they would consider it open space. I have to get the actual numbers, but it varied. And there was no consistency other than underutilized or underdeveloped.
So would that even include, would open space even include industrial areas that have no green on them, that are just like parking lots and things like that? Or?
That it would not include, but it would include things like schools, graveyards, cemeteries, schools, and some of them they included the high schools, the junior highs. As long as there was some sort of green and open space that could be landscaped, it was included in their definition.
How's a cemetery underutilized or underdeveloped when it's got stuff on it?
I think it's because it's got a lot of green, and they're utilizing it as a corridor for birds, for animals. As long as it's part of that, they were including it in their definition.
It's kind of a habitat. I mean, if you think about these places, they're habitats that support non-human utilization.
Okay.
So anyway, it was part of their biotic corridor plans, and for some of them, they did utilize biotic corridors in their definition of open space because they were trying to create areas to link larger green space areas with each other. And they used that as part of their definition to define it as open space and a lot of it dealt with conservation, which doesn't necessarily have to be how we define our open space, but that's what many of the villages and towns ended up arguing when they put certain lots under open space definitions. It was the whole thing of trying to conserve. Because it was probably one of the easiest ways to convince people to agree with putting something as an open space.
But when you say, this is Erica, when you say putting something as an open space, we're not really creating any sort of rules about how people can treat there, even if it's private open space. We're just collecting data and saying, we have X number of, wooded or meadow type parcels, or even lawn or turf.
Right.
I think those are probably the three categories that we look at: wooded parcels, lawn/turfy parcels, and meadows, if we have any. I mean, I can't think of any meadows that we've got, but certainly cemeteries are great. Schools.
There's a section of Crawbucky right by the train station that I walked past the other day that looks a lot like a meadow.
Okay.
So Crawbucky as a whole might be wooded in some sections and meadow in some sections.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm using, because Leilani many months ago, you sent us some guidelines on how we should identify our different levels. So I'm actually using that to kind of guide how I'm going to break up some of this stuff. So level 1, for example, was parks, cemeteries, utility green space, preserves, and then there was level 2, which were the vacant or derelict municipal lots, or structures that are owned by the village. Level 3 dealt with vacant private lots, which we do have a few of those. And that's where my concern comes in with whether they're still I guess, open space in the sense of, I don't know if they're actually still truly vacant and what those lots might look like.
And also the sizing. I guess when people
Yeah.
look at open space, they'll say, oh, 20% of your municipality is open space. But when you look at it, like in a place
It's
like
all like-
Yonkers, you got in Ossining, there are like these little triangles that actually look like they're somebody's property until you
Right.
realize it's considered, it's going to municipality, and it could be, 12 feet by 12 feet and triangular or something. You can't even use it for anything. So I think that will be part of the data collection.
Yes, and that's what I was hoping for with the going out and actually seeing it in person. I mean, I'm looking at the map that I was given last year, and like I'm looking at vacant lots that are next to each other, but I don't even know if they're usable lots. Like if someone can actually build on them, are they? I don't know if they're on steep slopes, or if they truly are still vacant at this point.
So what are the next steps we need to take? So I love your categories, Kate. The level 1, level 2.
Leilani.
I mean, you meant Leilani. But although you did mention village-owned buildings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we considering that open space? Not really, right? Or
The
yes?
village-owned lots.
Well,
They're
lots,
not just
yes.
lots. Village owns the firehouses, many of the firehouses. That's
Those are
village
not
owned.
open space, though. Those are, I mean, except their lawns, maybe.
Yes, they do have actually in the back. Yeah.
I mean, we might want to say, so before you mentioned you mentioned even private property, and again, we don't want to get people upset about, us keeping track of their private property. So this is merely only to inform, the village, but we might want to set like a threshold of, what would be considered open space. Like, I don't know, maybe more than an acre, or, I mean, the village doesn't have a lot of private spaces that are, private.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that.
What I saw in, I think it was Croton, on the private lots was that a certain percentage had to be dedicated to open space. I mean, I think that's also part more of their comp plan and how they want development happening there. But they had a very specific percentage had to be set aside, whether it was like just an outdoor patio area or something, but there had to be under certain residential areas a certain amount of land dedicated toward just that. I don't know if we want to go that route. That could be more problematic.
How would we do that? How would we do that?
Yeah, I don't know how we would do it, but I don't think that's necessarily a direction that we need to consider or should go. But it was just an idea based on something that I saw. Yes, Leilani.
It might be worth, when we're dealing with like categories 3 and 4, that's when we start considering the size of the lots, or using that to further classify them. Just because, the way the scale works is like the higher the number, the more at risk and vulnerable they are. And kind of, I was like, what really needs to be designated and noted and possibly preserved? And, so if you've got like like a category 1 cemetery, I mean, the size is like, it doesn't really matter. But if you have like category 3, but it's only 5 feet, is that really worth a lot of like, preservation attempts?
I mean, this is a great point. And I would be interested to know how that would dovetail with extant zoning codes. For example, if we're talking about people, say we take my street, Ferris Place, and we say, okay, Ferris Place currently has X amount of open space as lawn, or, there's a small little forest behind our street also. So we have X amount of open space. I mean, I would think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but I would think that we already have codes that preempt people from converting their private property to non-open space? I mean, don't we have rules about people constructing? Can they not, is there like a maximum amount people can build out on their lot?
Depending on the zone you're in, Erica, there are what we call bulk requirements in our zoning code. So they're both bulk requirements in terms of total square footage that the building can actually take up. There are also setback requirements, both front, rear, side yard, and combined side yard. But it depends on the zoning district. If you're in, I believe it's Village Center zoning district, you can effectively construct almost property line to property line. In your residential, it's different, but it depends on how much but there are bulk requirements. And I should point out, though, you can get a variance from the bulk requirements through the Zoning Board of Appeals. But that's basically how they're restricted. There are also height restrictions as well, but so there are certain restrictions there. So if someone, was in a residential zone and it's in, let's say, the S100 zone, but they want to, essentially exceed the square footage, they'd have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Or if they wanted to build, let's say they wanted to put a deck that would go within the setback, they need a variance for that. So there are those restrictions that are already set forth within the zoning code.
Yeah, there's also impervious surface coverage, which I think probably is the closest impact to what you're talking about. So anytime there's an increase in the overall impervious surface coverage, that's land that was previously dirt that is now being turned into something else. Or in some instances, there is, pervious pavers or pervious, pavement, things of that nature that can go in that have different effects. So I don't know if this helps, but, as we're going through the process, the EAC can make recommendations to the, overall comp plan that talk about, building construction and design that take into consideration an increase in rain gardens, an increase in the use of porous pavers, instead of people who are putting in, long driveways to get to their backyard to put the car in the back, that there's consideration about changing the parking regulations to allow people to, park in the front and leave, if they can leave the back undisturbed, or if you want to continue to have people going to the back, to require, the use of porous pavers over asphalt to ensure that that water is sort of, percolating back into the, into the ground. And so I think those are considerations that certainly through the comp plan process, you can make recommendations on that would be affected by the zoning code as you start building out stuff.
Okay.
So those are pieces that I would definitely look at.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
I had a question. This is Tom Boland. When we talk about privately owned open space, I was under the impression that we were still talking about empty or vacant lots, not necessarily just, backyards. Was that my misunderstanding, or are we talking about something else?
No, I think when we initially were talking about it, we were speaking about large private areas, like, for example, places like Mariondale, where they have large amounts of open space. It was just, I saw examples from other villages that had started incorporating residential private property. I think because they were trying to build up the amount of open space they had for whatever particular village or town needs they had. So it was just an example that I was drawing from. We don't necessarily have to do it that way. Looking at how our village is constructed, it might not be beneficial to try to go down that route, because it just might end up being harder on us in identifying our spaces if we did that. So it was just a tossing it out for discussion.
One thing I wanted to tell you about, the other day, Stuart sent me an email asking about Avalon, right? And so Avalon has the OCA that runs right through the middle of it. And then Behind it is Crawbucky. So as part of the approval process, and tell me if I'm wrong about how I'm describing this, Stuart, but there was an agreement with the developer that they would leave essentially a trail that you could take from the OCA and take it all the way to Crawbucky. And as part of it, part of this land was deeded over to the village. This space couldn't be developed in the future. And if you look at it, if you're walking through there, you might not know exactly what it is. But for people who do know, I mean, it's a pretty well-beaten trail. I think people take their dogs, they go jogging back there. It's a beautiful piece of open space. And so when you have projects like Avalon and like I think the other one that you mentioned, you know, part of the site plan approval means that a huge swath of this cannot be developed anymore. So, you know, I think it is important to calculate that, to have an understanding of how much open space there is, and especially when you have some of it that, in this instance, is preserved as part of the process. You know, it's open space. It's essentially dedicated open space at this point. It's worth counting. It's harder to do in, you know, single 1/8 of an acre lots, but it's not as hard to do in huge multifamily properties that have significant amounts of green space that are left undeveloped.
And there's nothing to say that open space necessarily has to be accessible to the public. There were a number of places that had places that weren't accessible, but because they were not open for development and they essentially were in an easement or agreed to not have development happening, they were counted in some of the plans for open space. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's publicly accessible either.
Okay, this is Erica. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about, you know, individual village lots, but, you know, if I think about holistically, you know, we do have one giant strip of lawn along many of our streets. And if that, you know, if that is considered open space, even if there's no sort of legislation or anything coming out of it, just to know that that's green, that's interesting to know and interesting to possibly track over time. I hadn't really thought about something, you know, quite that small, but it is in itself a bit of a corridor, isn't it? I mean, compared to, as Stuart mentioned, you know, the center of the village where the people can just maximize their footprint. Imagine if, you know, that were happening on some of the neighborhoods off of Croton Avenue, you know, it would be much different. In terms of wildlife, it would be very, very different because, you know, here I've lived on Ferris Place for 10 years. I used to live on the more developed part of Ferris Place. Now I live on a less developed part of Ferris Place. Still a village street, but the change as a biologist, the change of the creatures that are living on this, the part of the Ferris Place that has a forest behind it, as opposed to the other one that was heavily developed, is tremendous change in biodiversity. So, I mean, it's an interesting point.
What you're pointing out, that's what I'm looking at on the map. So things like that, you know, and they're all labeled as individual vacant lots.
Yeah,
so
that lot would be such a tremendous addition to the town because, you know, it's undevelopable and it's one of the only forested lots in the village, and there's a lot going on back there. And so, yeah, I mean, in as much as not like we want to get on a tangent right now, but in as much as the open space program can eventually inform possibly a land acquisition, you know, a conservation easement type program. Yeah. I mean, that lot would be really great because it's hard to develop and, you know, I don't know.
And it's not the only patch in the village that is like that. There are a couple of more, and they're not giant, but they're next to each other where it could be a large area. So, you know, my interest is to know is it on these steep slopes? What does the area look like? Because it might not be developed at this point because it's not areas that really is conducive to it. And if it's not conducive to it, why not just put it as part of the inventory and say we've got it?
So do we need to, I mean, okay. So let's just summarize things, and so we can make some notes moving forward and kind of focus ourselves a little bit. Do we want to set a threshold of green space size that we consider open space? Or do we want to say, you know, even if this is just a 0.1 acre piece of green space, when I add it up with all the 0.1 acres of green space on the street, that's actually considered green space? That's kind of a philosophical question for the group. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on that. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I think when we're out doing the survey and the inventory, we should include everything regardless of size. And then once we've compiled all that data, then we can use that to kind of inform the inventory. And like, you know, we might start noticing patterns once we've surveyed everything, that will then allow us to like dynamically develop this inventory and an, you know, an actual open space map and plot for the village.
That's a good point.
That's what I think. As far as for data gathering, I think we should include everything. Even if it's a little like, you know, spot of greenery in the middle of the village that's like a 5 diameter circle, like.
There's a little spot on the corner that's
Yeah,
just hanging out by itself. Yeah, there are a few of those.
Exactly, so.
I live up the block from one.
I agree with that. I think the first pass should be all about just trying to categorize everything that we have, and then we can kind of make decisions once we have that high level view of everything.
I think that works.
Okay. Kate, do you want to, I took some notes here. Do you want to send me your notes, and then I can sort of, if I'm, you know, I'm sure I don't have much more to add than you, but should we start to formalize our category system?
I think that, yes, we need to do that. I can send you the document that I've been working on that has everything in it. Of course, everything that's in it, though, is not going to be in the final product, but you can at least see where I was getting the ideas from and where I was heading with it based on what is here. So I've compiled all that. I can send that to you. I can send that to you tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Jaime, this is Erica, I think Jaime's got a really great point that, you know, we should really think about ways to piggyback this project with the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And then we can sort of start to develop some goals, because probably most of you were probably at the meeting, with the exception of maybe Jennifer and Jaime, when the Westchester Land Trust came to present to us. And, you know, if we want to, times are crazy, but eventually we're going to emerge from what's going on right now. And if there is some money to get some land trust solicitations, it would be great to, the land trust really wants to see that we have an organized idea behind our request, that they solicit a property for us. And I think that that's a wonderful way for us to have a long-lasting mark on the green space in the village. And we should definitely take advantage of it, because as the woman from the Land Trust said during her presentation, I think she said we're the most densely populated village in Westchester. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
that is correct.
That is correct. We are the most densely
Are we referring to
populated-
village or municipality?
We are the most densely populated village in Westchester County. That is correct.
Okay.
That doesn't make it the most densely populated municipality, the most densely village. And even given that, I would argue you take out the cities, we're probably one of the most densely populated municipality as well. The town is not.
My guess
Austin
is
town is
my guess is the only places that would even come close are Mount Vernon and Elmsford.
Elmsford.
Yonkers has a lot of kind of less dense areas, and so does New Rochelle. So
There are no, those are
Ossining
cities.
is quite dense. I need to check the numbers on the density, but Ossining is really dense, the village.
Yep. I mean, the town is not, but the villages.
I actually have a small thing in the document where we've got like 7,600 people per mile. Like it's 3.5 square miles, and when I did the calculation, it was
Right.
Something like, where is I have it at the top. It was
right.
yeah, almost 8,000 people. 8,000 people per square mile. Excuse me.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you take
Mount Vernon,
out
I think is.
the,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rika.
if you take out the cemeteries and all that stuff, it becomes more densely populated.
Yeah.
Take out the, the schools, the cemeteries, et cetera, and I think it becomes even worse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very densely populated. Again, not the town. The people use the word Ossining, so we just want to make sure it's the village.
Okay, well, let's definitely plow forward because this is a really important time with the comprehensive plan for us to get our foot in the door to possibly knock ourselves down the list as the most densely populated village in Westchester. I'm not sure, but it's not really a big medal you want to hang on the door, so we might not want to keep it going.
I would mention that density is not in and of itself a bad thing, and the number of people per square mile is a lot different than the amount of developed space per square mile. And so, the amount of efficiency that you get in a highly dense, block in Manhattan is significantly more efficient in terms of impervious surface coverage and everything else for humans than you have in a suburban area, which has a significant amount of, land that's been taken over and turned into streets, and a significant amount of pipes that have to be laid out to service a small number of people. So when you talk about efficiency, just from a human perspective, high density is not in and of itself bad. I think that, and I don't know where anybody stands here. So I think it's important to figure out what you are looking for. But if the concern is about saving preserved space, then I think that's one part of the discussion. If the concern is about having too many people per square mile, then that's a different discussion. And I think it's important to distinguish that those are two different things, and they're two different goals. And if they're both a goal, then that's great. But it's important to figure out which one of those goals you're trying to check, or if it's both of them, because it becomes easier to hone in on the answer.
This is Erica.
That data collection has an opinion and a goal and a judgment. So the question is, the question to answer by the committee to start with, it's like a science project. You got to get the premise right so that the answer follows the premise without the premise being agreed to and articulated. If it's just data, is just data. So collecting data is just collecting data. What Haim is talking about is, I wouldn't say it's judgmental, but
interpreting.
I don't think either is bad or good, by the way. I just think that it's important to note that he's pointing out, you need to sort of say, what am I collecting the data for? What is the purpose of this?
Right.
This is Erica, and I just want to say that, yes, I think the first cut is definitely just informing. And then after that, we could just, the interpretation of the data we collected is right. That's a whole separate part of the process. And I'm not really here to, state what the goal of the committee is in terms of development. But I do think that what's worth maybe considering is, looking at considering the different zoning regions of the village. And, we can sort of finally parse out that the goals of the central business district might not necessarily be the same as the goals of, you know, the other less densely populated areas. Like those are the types of sort of digging and in the weeds discussions that, you know, we should think about to have later on once we have that data collected.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's worthwhile to, you know, as part of this discussion, think about the environmental justice aspect of a lot of these things. Because, you know, one of the discussions that I think is pretty heavy, you know, when talking about environmental justice is saying, well, look, we have all this density, and maybe density is good and maybe it's bad, but for you know, a certain segment of the population, none of them are within walking distance of a park, right? And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think most people would say that's a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is it the density that has created that problem? Maybe yes, maybe no, but is it the lack of developmental controls that gave consideration to the need for available open space that allowed that to, you know, to happen, to get to a place where we are, where not only do people not have a backyard to play in, but they also don't have a park to play in their neighborhood, right? And I think that's, you know, when you're going through these open space, you know, process, that's one of the things that you're going to be really able to suss out pretty fast. Because you're going to know, you know, we do have some private open space that's vacant and, you know, could be used as a trail, but is currently owned by a private property owner. If the village bought it, they could turn it into a trail that would now make, you know, walking trails within a quarter of a mile for people who who have to go a mile to get to the closest parks. That's some kind of information that you get from that, right? And there are other instances where if you have highly dense neighborhoods and you have, you know, nowhere that you could put a big park in, but you do have a couple of corner parcels that have, you know, vacant lots or sort of dilapidated buildings that that have been boarded up for a while, and you could say, hey, we could put a playground in here and create open space and make available open space for people in that community. And at the same time, you know, you could say another section that's more suburban part of the village, you could say, look, you know, we have the kind of development that we're looking for. We like the suburban feel. We want to make sure that as new projects come into the space, we want to limit the amount of impervious surface. It's closer to where wetlands are, right? So we want to make sure that there's the right kind of infiltration because it's in the, you know, the sink kill watershed or various different things. So there's a lot of, you know, a lot of data points that you're going to get from this process, and there's a lot of input that you know, can add to this after the fact to say, like, this is what we want. So I apologize if it came across as judgmental, what I was saying before. I'm not trying to make judgment. I think everyone here, it has to make a decision about what they want to do. There's a ton of utility in that data that will allow you to decide what kind of village you want to be. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer, but there is certainly an answer. I think everybody knows it once they think about it, once they hear it, they say, that's what I'm looking for, or I don't like that. And that's why that data is really so critical.
This is Erica. On the contrary, I think you're bringing up some very salient points, Jaime, and I'm glad that you're, you know, bringing up some points that are not really coming across, at least my thoughts. So this is great. This is a good discussion. Certainly distance to playgrounds, excellent, you know, I think thing to keep in mind. And distance to a you know, infiltration with the water bodies and water courses, also really good. So these are, you know, eventually, maybe when we have this data, if it's, I don't know, I'm not sure how the comprehensive plan process is going to work, but we may want to have a subcommittee to discuss goals that includes people outside of the EAC. I don't know. It's just something.
There is an environmental subcommittee, and I believe that all of you are going to be invited to be on that subcommittee as well as other people. There's an entire section of the comprehensive plan that deals with environmental and sustainability issues. Yeah. So that's certainly a huge piece of what's going on. And just sort of anecdotally, I think that my experience with the village over the short time that I've been here is that environmental sustainability concerns are of premier importance in the village. So I think it would be impossible to go through a comprehensive planning process where, you know, that wasn't not just a big piece of what you put in terms of one section, but sort of influencing every section, whether it's a discussion about economic development or housing or anything else.
Yeah, this is Erica. Certainly, you know, there's so many people who are thinking about the environment in Ossining, and that's a great thing. In open space goals is sort of like a sub part of the environmental goals. And when you talk about environmental justice, that you are bringing up something that, you know, is important to consider. That's where I'm sort of like, you know, we may want to think about how to approach that moving forward. Because I don't know how many of you guys live in an apartment. I don't live in an apartment. I have amenities that, thank the universe, I have with my 3 crazy children to run around in my yard. But I see how people are really suffering right now without green space. And it's really something that, you know, we need to keep in mind. I mean, this is an especially difficult time for a lot of people. Thank goodness we're emerging from it. But if, you know, we may be going back into a similar situation in the fall, and then and again, people are like trapped in their apartments and they don't have access to green space, and that's just very difficult for people's mental state. And that is something that, you know, the open space, we want to keep in the, you know, keep in our minds for that.
Agreed.
Okay. I don't have anything more to say about open space, but yes, please do send me your notes, and then again, I will consolidate things into a letter, circulate it to the group, and then we can, well, the comprehensive plan, we don't really need to go in the letter, right? Because the other 2 components we're sending to the zoning board, but I do think we need to start like thinking about how to move the comprehensive plan forward without the interns. So for my job, I do sometimes look at construction plans, and since I haven't been able to go in the field safely for a couple of weeks, sometimes I just do like a Google drive-by, and you know, that's obviously much more helpful if I already kind of know the area. But if I do like a street view and sort of look and see what's going around, how much of a desktop analysis can we do?
I did a lot of that already.
Okay.
So I did that actually last year when we first started the project. I did a Google Street View of a lot of these areas, and it's possible that Google may have updated some of the streets since then, because the street view for some of Ossining at the time was 2013, 2014. So it was a bit out of date, which was what pushed me toward wanting to go and actually see it in person, because I didn't want to rely on data that are, you know, 6 years old, 7 years old at this point. But it's possible it may have updated it since then, because I know that they did do a lot in like September, October of last year. So I can double check on that, and I can go through it again and just see if there's anything that was updated. But I did mark off a number of places already that, you know, I think would fit the description. And at this point, it's just, at this point, assuming nothing has been updated on Google, it's just a matter of just doing the footwork.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, this is Erica. What do you mean by footwork?
Going out and actually looking at it.
And what are we gathering from looking at a site? What do we need? What kind of information do we need to gather from a foot visit that we can't gather from the satellite data?
Actually observing what it is, you know, cataloging the vegetation, making note of what the vegetation, the state of it is. Especially during the summer, we can see if there's actually a lot of wildlife in there. If it's, you know, lots of junk, we can just make a survey of the space itself that you can't really see in Google satellite data.
How much knotweed might actually be in it?
Yeah, you know, make note of the buildings around it. You know, just.
Okay, this is Erica. So I'm having a hard time I'm having a hard time. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. So if we just want to know what's the open space right now. We're not doing any interpretation. So the first cut is if it's anything that's got green stuff on it. So Jaime, how recent is, or Kate, you can answer this too. How recent is the county's GIS flyover?
I don't know how.
Actually, so it's funny you mentioned that because I'm on the county's website right now. They have 2018 planimetric data. I guess my first question is, who here is familiar with GIS data? Like, what's your level of familiarity with GIS data? I used to be a teacher for like 7 years teaching GIS. So I'm happy to give like a quick 2-minute refresher. I'm seeing a lot of this and then not much.
My
Okay.
skills are basic. I am not a GIS expert.
Okay.
My skills are basic. I can maneuver myself around and do some simple stuff, but that's about it.
Okay. So Tom, what'd you say?
I said I'm in the same boat there. This is Tom Bowen. I use GIS at work sometimes, but it's mostly just to maneuver around and try to bring up property details.
Like, I can't sit down and make a very detailed map if that was the request. Like, I can't go and make you something beautiful.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna make a suggestion and let me know if there's something that y'all would be interested in having. Fortunately, Austin is not a gigantic place, so it allows us to do something where we could make a tiled set of maps, sort of, you know, sectioning off areas. And what I could do is I could take sort of like a faint layer with the parcel boundaries, which is helpful because you can tie in the land use data to that map, which is I think what you already have. But we can lay on top of that structures and sort of the street boundary lines. And so if for street data, a lot of times what you'll see are lines. So they're essentially street center line data. The planimetric data is better because what it does is it provides, with some level of accuracy, the sort of the boundaries of the impervious surface that has been built out. So it catches most of the streets within some measure of accuracy. Again, you know, it's not a perfect thing that you would want to run an analysis on, but it's pretty good. It has the general boundaries of the structure, so houses, and sometimes it even captures sidewalks and streets. So if there are areas that are of particular interest, I can create tiles, maybe 10, 15 tile maps, and you can mark them up and say, hey, we're really interested in finding out more about this, which can help guide the discussion to go out and do site visits. Which for me, you know, if I work from the house, if I'm up there, I'll go do site visits. I can pick up some of this, you know, day by day if we want to split it up amongst the group. And then for you, all you would have to do is mark up however you would want me to tag that data, and I can create a GIS data set from that you can then use to run analysis and do all sorts of other stuff. So it's something that, you know, as long as I'm not having to dedicate more than a few hours a week doing this, I don't think I would have too much of an issue handling. Again, you know, I'm pretty familiar with GIS, so I can move pretty quickly in it as long as my software is, as long as my computer's not going so bad. I did have to make like the map for the wetlands. I'm not sure if y'all saw the wetlands map for the wetlands ordinance.
Yeah.
That map took me about, I want to say it took me about 3 hours to make, and it's mostly because I don't have the highest level of ArcGIS. There's sort of like 3 levels, and I had like the low level, the mid level ArcGIS. I needed the fast level and a fast computer, and I was running it remotely from my laptop to my computer. It was a nightmare.
I know that pain. I know that pain.
It was a nightmare. I needed Arc Info, and they had Arc Editor. It was not working.
This is Erica, and thank you so much, Jaime. I think that would be really helpful because I'm more of a user than a producer in GIS. And, I'm in the same boat as Tom. I just use it a little bit for work. But I would, I guess, when you do because I'm not asking these questions to be annoying. It's only because I've done projects where we use the desktop analysis and then we talk about doing the ground truthing, foot visit analysis, but I'm never quite sure what to look for when we do the ground truthing. What are we looking for when we go to visit the site that we can't see from the planimetric data?
Well,
This is the other Tom Boland. What I was going to ask is, could we put an observation form together? So, if we can split these sites up, we know exactly what we're looking for. We can just go out and kind of go down the list and jot down the details that we need and take photos of the things that we're focusing on.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. If I could ask, when you put in the data, anybody here who's used the land use data set for Westchester County, that was a data set that when I worked at Westchester County, me and my boss put together. So that data set took in a lot of information. It took the RPS property code and it married it to a ton of information, including unit count, acreage, underlying zoning, so on and so forth. And so that data set, which is now, I guess, about 10 years old, has been used to run all sorts of different types of analysis. And the key with that is that the data that goes into it has to meet some sort of kind of mathematical quality, right? So if you're going to be designating different parcels differently, and you want to draw a line and say, right here, this is woodland, right here, this is lawn, then you sort of need to draw that line in the sand, and I can interpret that onto the GIS data set, and I can tag it with a 1 or a 2 or whatever, and then I can run an analysis down the road that says, how much woodland do we have? They've all been tagged like this. So what's not helpful to me in doing that is if you say it's a mix of these 3 different things, unless that is in it of itself a category that you want me to consider.
Okay.
Right? So you really need to stick to hard categories in the GIS data. Otherwise, what this becomes is not really a data analysis tool, it just becomes a presentation tool. And so if you want it to be a data analysis tool, it has to be real data and not just, paintings.
I can look through some of the other open space and comp plans. A number of them did include forms like what we're talking about in their appendices, so I can pull something from those. And I think in the land use data set, there was a document or a PDF that had some, I might be confusing it with another document, but there were a number of documents that had forms where they used them specifically to fill in what you're saying, to fill in different categories, sizes of lots, whatever was there, taking actual observations of what is there to categorize it, and then creating a map like that for analysis. So I can see if I can pull something like that so we can at least make a basic form to start, and then we can fix it up as we see fit.
That's this, Erica. So that's great. So to be clear, we don't, what's the universe of, can you give me like an estimate of what the universe is of parcels that we would need to visit? I mean, we could probably not visit a lot of them.
You don't have to visit all of them.
Okay.
It's not something we have to do all of them. I would particularly like to look at the lots that are vacant, that are near each other, next to each other, that form large swaths of land. Because I'm curious to know why they haven't been developed. Not that I'm saying that we should run out and develop all of a sudden, but to me, it's like bells are going off in my head saying there must be a reason why, and I just want to see the area.
So, one of the things about the GIS data sets is not only do we have planimetric data, but we also have steep slope data, which is built off of the 2-foot topo LiDAR data that came out like 10 years ago. So 10 years, LiDAR, does everybody here know what LiDAR is? Okay, so LiDAR is basically they take a plane and they shoot little lasers down at everything. and then it tells you what's there, whether it's vegetation, whether it's, you know, impervious surface, how high it is, how deep it is. And that LiDAR data is something that you've probably seen in some of the Google Maps, because they show these trees there and they kind of, they drape the aerial photography on top of it. And that's how you see sort of what looks like a tree and how the heights of the buildings and so on and so forth. The LiDAR data was shot creating 2-foot topos. And from those 2-foot topos, they were able to create a steep slopes data set. So we know where all of the streams are. We know where all of the wetlands are. We know where all of the steep slopes are. We know where all of the structures are. We know where all of the curbs are for streets. So we have a massive amount of data that we can overlay on these maps, or even make a couple of maps for each one of these that will tell you. And that might help you isolate down what you want to look into. Because what you're looking at with that vacant lot is like the tip of the iceberg in terms of the amount of data. Westchester County is famous for having one of the best GIS programs in the country, literally. So we're blessed in that sense that there's a ton of information that we don't have to go out and find ourselves.
Yes.
Can I just want to interject for 1 second, not on topic, off topic. It's 9 o'clock and I actually need to jump off soon because my daughter just arrived home and I have to sort of greet her. I wanted to let everybody know on tomorrow's agenda is wetlands. On the BOT agenda tomorrow that you could zoom into, and the agenda is on the website. Jaime, I think, is once again a keynote speaker, so to speak. I am interested in moving wetlands along, but getting information, while always interesting, I think we can learn a lot more. I don't know if Jaime wants to talk about it, but I'm encouraging anybody that wants to attend by Zoom from EAC to please attend. And also, if there's anything else I need to know about before I jump off, let me know.
This is Erica. Thank you, Rika. I did send some comments on behalf of the board, and it looks like they were seen. And I don't necessarily have anything more to add.
It was read, actually. I believe Jaime, I was going to read it, but I think Jaime actually read your notes into the record.
Yeah, I read most of them into the record. I think I summarized one major point, but I read a bulk of them.
Almost all of it, yes. Did a great job.
So I will try and tune in tomorrow.
As will I.
I don't know if anybody else had any comments about, Jaime, your presentation was great. I wish I had those presentation skills. That was amazing. I felt like such an old fart with my PowerPoint skills.
You know, you got to do Prezi is the best. Prezi is
I haven't used Prezi in a long time because I can't do Prezi in that way. It's definitely
great.
I will tell you that Prezi has changed. When I first did Prezi like 10 years ago, I was in college. I was teaching college students. They were coming in giving their presentations using Prezi. I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing in the world. And back then it was really hard because you had to zoom all over these places and it did these weird things. Then it doesn't do as much of that stuff anymore. It's actually kind of toned down a little bit and it's easier to use. So
I have to check it out again.
It's easier than PowerPoint. I'll say it like that. Easier than PowerPoint.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if everyone noticed. It looks like Cynthia Moses has joined our conversation, and she did ask a question about the wetlands draft. And so if we could tune her in so she could speak, or if she doesn't have audio, feel free to type your question, Cynthia, and I can read it out. We can read it out and discuss your question.
She is on here, so I've promoted her to panelist.
Great.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
So I have had interactions in the past with Stuart and with Rika, and in the past with Victoria. I did watch the village board meeting last week and thought that the presentation was fabulous. And a short history for those who don't know me, I actually am a neighbor in Newcastle who was part of the T-Town group that fought very heavily from an environmental standpoint, a watershed standpoint, a wetland standpoint, with regard to the Sunshine Home application to Newcastle. And I don't know how many people in the village have read your proposed draft, but I have read it from cover to cover. And Rika, you know a lot of the history. I have a question, and Rika, I'm glad you're on. I don't know when the public will be able to participate, and I'm such a weedy kind of person that I wonder, since I've learned so much about protecting watershed wetland, I was so concerned about Indian Brook Reservoir, whether you all would be interested in me going through this document, especially with Stuart, allow me to go down and point out things that I noticed that unfortunately I missed when I was kind of a newbie to this with Newcastle and trying to protect environmental resources.
This is Erica. I love to hear your comments, Cynthia. Can we schedule you
tonight because you guys will never get to bed?
That's right. Can we schedule you for the next EAC meeting? I would love to hear your experience. And I think all of us, I speak for all of us when I say that. And I would like to get you on the agenda for the EAC meeting in July.
So for me, it's also a question. One of the things I learned from Newcastle is kind of you snooze, you lose, because the government does have to move forward with their drafts and make resolutions and then get them approved, and something has to get accomplished. So as far as what goes on at the village board level in moving this proposal through, Enrica, I just heard that you were very eager to make it happen. I just don't want to miss the opportunity to, share.
This is Erica. Rika, can you please speak to the timeline? Do we have?
Yeah, so Stuart could do a better job and Jaime can for the timeline. Let me speak for the general everyday public commentary. Legislative sessions have time periods in them where any member of the public can speak. So if anybody has an opinion, whether they're representing an organization, there's a certain time frame, but anybody could speak. Stuart can remind me, I can never remember if it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, which one it falls into. So anybody could speak about anything we're looking at as part of the regular agenda. So that's one opportunity to come prepared with something written, because otherwise people do what I'm doing now, which is sort of talk endlessly, and they run out of time. So that's one thing.
I would absolutely run out of time. There's
so concise, writing a short story versus a novel, always appreciated. And there is a buzzer that
line by line, the draft document.
But if you want to do a red line on the draft document, also public knowledge, you could, I believe, send it to this committee. The committee may meet once a month, but I'm not sure, Erica, that there's anything to stop anybody in the public from redlining any document.
Fantastic. On the contrary, I'd love to see a red line.
There are comments that you could do by tomorrow. It's perfectly great.
So how would she do that?
Questions though that are logistical. It does talk about how everything that's underlined is new, everything in parentheses or brackets is deleted matter. But when I print it out, everything is underlined. Is this just a from scratch new document?
Yes, Ms. Moses, it is.
Fantastic.
Except for the very first paragraph. Section 149.1. That's the original freshwater wetlands ordinance in the village. Right. Everything else after that is brand new.
Love it. And then question number 2, one of the things that was striking, and this is a little historical note having to do with the Indian Brook Reservoir watershed, So a lot of that watershed is located in my backyard in Newcastle and across the street heading into Yorktown in kind of T-Town territory. And when I spoke with Victoria Garrity back in the days, I don't know if you remember the Con Ed tree disaster along Spring Valley Road and Cedar Lane Road and Glendale Road. Well, so there was an enormous amount of tree removal that actually Village was never made aware of ahead of time, and no ability to make an environmental assessment as to whether that would impact your watershed, because it was land that is your watershed. So it strikes me in this proposal that you do not reference any critical resources in terms of wetlands that are outside your village.
You're correct. We don't do that. We do have that in terms of notification to adjoining municipalities, which would be required. What I would ask you to do is, I'm happy to get a red line from you. I get red lines a lot. So if you want to send one through, that's fine. I should point out that most of this ordinance is based upon the town's ordinance. There are a few, Town of Ossining, there are a few sections in here based upon, that come from the town of Newcastle, and I think one or two things from the village of Briarcliff Manor, but it is pretty much from the town of Ossining's ordinance, because I confined most of my work in terms of drafting this to the surrounding municipalities here, although I have looked at the ordinances throughout most of Westchester County. But I am happy to get a red line. And just in response to your question, there will be ample times for the public to speak on this, because in addition to the review of the local law, this is going to be subject to a secret review, and there will be comments from the public at that point as well.
Right. Okay.
Because this will be an action that will require a long form environmental assessment form, and then a determination by the Board of Trustees as lead agency as to whether it will be a positive declaration or a negative declaration. And that's something that is part of this process.
Okay, and that's great. So I understand I have more time to participate. I'm very happy to do it any way you'd be interested. One last piece.
Well, Ms. Moses, if I could ask one thing, I apologize. I just need to cut you off really fast. Because we do have to go in front of the board, me and Stuart, to discuss this matter tomorrow, I would say that it's extremely important that I get a chance to look at these comments by tomorrow, and it'd be helpful if I could get, I'm certainly going to talk to Stuart about them, but if there is a board member here on the EAC that would be willing to take a look at her comments so that we could have a discussion tomorrow, so that I can include potentially in my comments.
There's scratch marks on my first, go round. I don't know if you could even read my handwriting, and because I'm not in my office these days, I don't have the technical ability to do, decent work.
It is a 30-page document, but if you printed it and you can take pictures of it with your phone and send it to me, then I can probably try to make what I can out of it. The urgency here for me would be only because I do have to go in front of the board tomorrow.
On your meeting tonight, because I realized tomorrow, and I watched you last week. There's one, I'll try. And do you have a number that I can call you at to make sure I can get through the technical issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me give it to you right now. If you give me a moment, I have to pull it up because this is a new phone and I don't remember my number.
No problem. In the meantime, I'll mention one other thing. Many different residents of the T-Town area, and I think Rika and Stuart, you might be aware of it, were very interested in a district overlay, an environmental district overlay, to try to have some sort of uniform regulations for damaging wetlands, et cetera, construction, subdivision, whatever, that would encompass Ossining, Croton, Cortland, Newcastle, Yorktown, and Vedat Gashi, who took over from Mike Kaplowitz, said he would be very interested in working with each of the towns and municipalities to make that a reality. And Ivy Poole, who, you know, took over as the head of the Newcastle Town Board, is also very interested in that kind of work. So it might be a good moment, given what you're doing, to push Vedat in that direction.
All right, point well made and taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Moses, I have, on second thought, I think I would prefer if you emailed me. I wouldn't mind giving you my number, but I would rather not do it over.
A million people watching, no problem.
Yes,
Tell
well,
me
probably
your
not a
email.
million, but if you could email me at jmartinez
Yeah,
at villageofossining.org.
yeah,
It's JMARTINEZ at villageofossining.org.
got it.
And I can, I can email you back my phone number. I'm always at my office nowadays. So
Okay. Yes. Well, I appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate you listening to me, especially since I'm not a village resident, but I do care deeply about this topic for all of us.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything else anybody has for me before I jump off? Or a question, or, I mean, obviously anybody can email me at any time.
I think we're all done, right?
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
done.
Thanks so much, everybody. And again, we'll pull together that stuff into a letter, and we have to talk a little bit more about next steps for the comprehensive plan. But it sounds like we're on the right path. So
yeah, we kind of jumped off of the open space thing real fast.
We did. We did.
I-
So let's.
I would like to, if maybe me and Kate, I know we've been kind of phone tagging a little bit. Maybe we should get together and have a conversation about the mapping end of it to see if
Yes, I
start
am
putting
free
something
on
together.
Friday. I will email you before I go to bed tonight. I'm free on Friday.
Okay.
That's usually my work day now these days, so I can definitely, we can do that.
Yeah, and if anything, I can try to put together at least a by the next meeting, sort of a template for a series of maps that we can use to start working on this a little bit closer.
That would be great.
So this is Erica. So it sounds like we're starting with anything that's green, and from there we're going to subdivide into the different categories that were based on Leilani's initial suggestions. So I guess maybe circle Jaime if he's not already in the loop on that, and then we could start to sort of subdivide our open space data into different subdivisions.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.